The last sound I heard before everything went wrong was my name, spoken softly from the water. Not a scream, not panic, just close enough to sound familiar. At the time, I didn't understand how dangerous that was. We arrived at the lake in the early afternoon. Stephanie was driving, quietly humming along to the radio. The windows rolled down as the smell of pine and damp earth filled the car. The road narrowed, turned to gravel, and eventually led us exactly where the listings said it would. The cabin stood alone at the edge of the forest, pressed tightly against the trees, with the lake stretching out behind it like a sheet of dark glass. No other cabins, no docks, no boats, just water and forest. It felt perfect. We had planned the trip as a reset, a few days without phones, without work, without the constant noise of the city. Stephanie looked lighter, happier, the way she always did when life slowed down. I remember standing there with the keys in my hand, thinking that this silence was exactly what we had been missing. The cabin itself was small but well kept. One bedroom, a living room with a fireplace, large windows facing the lake. Whoever built it clearly wanted the water to be seen at all times. I noticed that immediately. The lake wasn't very large, but it was deep. Its surface barely moved, even when the wind passed through the trees. No ripples, no insects hovering above it. It reflected the sky too perfectly, as if it were trying to imitate it. Stephanie stepped out onto the porch and leaned against the railing, smiling. "It's beautiful," she said. "It feels like the lake is watching us." I laughed, because it sounded like something said without thinking. That evening, we cooked dinner and ate with the windows open. As darkness crept in, the forest grew louder, crickets, distant birds, the soft cracking of wood shifting in the night. The lake, by contrast, remained silent, too silent. By the time night fully settled, the water had vanished into darkness. The moon reflected faintly near the shoreline, but beyond that there was nothing, just black, unbroken emptiness. We stayed outside longer than we should have. The lake was so quiet that the silence itself began to feel heavy. I caught myself listening for something, anything, as if part of me expected the quiet to eventually break. That was when we heard the first sound. It wasn't a splash, not movement. It sounded like a whisper, carried over a long distance, the words blurring together as they traveled across the water. I couldn't make out what was being said, only the rhythm of it, slow, patient, repeating. Stephanie tilted her head. "Do you hear that?" she asked. I did. The sound was coming from the lake. I told myself it was the wind moving across the water, or waves brushing against something submerged. Ordinary explanations, simple ones. Then the whisper stopped and returned, closer. I felt a strange pull. Not physical, not emotional, more like the deliberate redirection of my attention. My eyes drifted toward the edge of the water before I realized I was doing it. That was when the whisper became a word. "Ryan." I waited for Stephanie to react. She didn't. I didn't say anything. We went inside shortly after and locked the door, even though there was no real reason to. As we got ready for bed, I kept glancing toward the windows, half expecting to see movement on the surface of the lake. There was nothing, only still water. At the time, I thought that meant we were safe. I didn't yet understand that silence isn't always the absence of something. Sometimes it means something is waiting. The second night was worse because it removed doubt. During the day, The lake behaved itself. Sunlight broke the surface into harmless fragments. Birds returned. Insects skimmed the water near the shore. If I hadn't heard my name the night before, I would have called it peaceful. Stephanie went swimming in the afternoon. I stayed on the porch, watching her from the shade. She waded in slowly, laughing at how cold it was, stopping when the water reached her waist. She never went farther. She said the bottom dropped too quickly, that it felt wrong beneath her feet. I didn't argue. While she was in the water, the lake looked normal. It rippled. It reacted. It accepted her presence without comment. That scared me more than the night before. We talked about leaving early. Not seriously, more as a joke. If it gets creepy, we'll bail, Stephanie said, smiling. I nodded and didn't tell her that I already thought it had. That evening, the forest quieted faster than it had the night before. The insects faded out first, then the birds. By the time the sun disappeared behind the trees, it felt as though someone had lowered the volume on the world. The lake went still. We were inside when it started. Not whispers this time. Voices, multiple, low and overlapping, like people speaking just beneath the surface of water. I couldn't make out words at first, only tone, inviting, calm, patient. Stephanie stiffened beside me. Okay, she said quietly. That's not the wind. We stood at the window, staring out at the black surface. The voices rose and fell together, almost synchronized, as if practicing, as if learning how to sound right. Then one voice separated from the others. It was hers, her exact voice, same cadence, same soft hesitation before speaking. Ryan, it said from the lake. Come here. Stephanie's breath caught. That wasn't me, she said immediately. I nodded. I couldn't look at her. If I did, I was afraid the voice would adjust again. The pull returned, stronger this time, a tightening behind my eyes, a certainty that the edge of the water was closer than it had been a moment ago, even though I hadn't moved. The voice tried again. Ryan, it said gently, you don't need to be afraid. Stephanie grabbed my arm hard enough to hurt. Don't listen, she whispered. It's copying us. We backed away from the window together. The voices didn't follow, not audibly, but the sense of being addressed didn't fade. It lingered, like the echo of a conversation you didn't finish. That night, neither of us slept. Every few minutes, the voices would return. Never loud, never urgent, always reasonable, always calm. Sometimes they used my name, sometimes Stephanie's, sometimes both, layered together in a way that made my skin crawl. They never asked directly. They suggested. By morning, we agreed on one thing without saying it out loud. We would not go near the lake after dark. Avoidance didn't weaken it. It sharpened it. During the day, the lake remained passive, almost indifferent. Sunlight scattered its darkness into something manageable. We stayed close to the cabin, kept conversations light, pretended this was still a vacation. At night, it learned. The voices no longer came only from the water. They drifted through the trees, carried on the edge of the wind. Soft at first, then clearer, always positioning themselves so that if we followed the sound, we would be moving closer to the lake without realizing it. Stephanie noticed before I did. It's trying to herd us, she said one night, her voice tight. Listen to where it's coming from. She was right. The voices avoided the cabin. They framed it. When we moved towards the back door, the sound shifted to the trees. When we retreated inside, it returned to the water. always guiding, never forcing. Sleep became impossible. When we closed our eyes, the voices continued inside our heads, not hallucinations, not imagined, but remembered with too much clarity. Phrases repeated, invitations softened into reassurance. You'll feel better once you're closer. The water is warmer than you think. You don't have to decide right now. I started dreaming of standing ankle deep at the shore, unable to remember how I'd gotten there. In the dreams, the water never moved, but something beneath it did, slowly adjusting to my presence. Stephanie began sleepwalking. The first time I woke to find the bed empty. The cabin door was open. I found her barefoot on the porch, standing perfectly still, staring at the lake. Her eyes were open, unfocused. She didn't respond when I called her name. When I grabbed her arm, she flinched, hard, and tried to pull away. "Stop," she murmured. "You're making it harder." It took both of us, shaking and crying, to get back inside. She didn't remember it in the morning. After that, I didn't sleep. I stayed awake, watching the doors, listening to the voices test new approaches. Sometimes they sounded like us arguing, sometimes like us laughing, sometimes like one of us calling for help from the shore. The lake was patient. On the fourth night, the water changed. Not the surface, the depth. Standing at the window, I realized I could no longer tell where the lake ended. The darkness extended too far, swallowing reflection, swallowing distance. It felt less like a body of water and more like an opening. That night, the voices stopped whispering. They spoke clearly. "Come together," they said. "It's safer that way." Stephanie stood up. I grabbed her wrist. She looked at me, not confused, not frightened, just tired. "We can't keep doing this," she said. "It won't stop." That was when I understood the next phase. It wasn't trying to take one of us. It wanted us both. We tried to leave the next morning. That was the plan. Wake up, pack the car, drive until the trees thinned, and the lake was just another memory you could dismiss as stress and coincidence. But the lake didn't let mornings belong to us anymore. Stephanie was quiet as we packed, too quiet. She moved with a kind of careful focus, like someone afraid that hesitation itself might invite interruption. I watched her constantly, afraid to look away even for a second. The water was calm, innocent. Sunlight lay across it without resistance. "You hear it, don't you?" she asked suddenly, not looking at me. I shook my head, even though that was a lie. "It's different now," she said. "It's not asking anymore." Before I could respond, she stepped past me and walked toward the back door. I grabbed her arm. She didn't fight. She didn't pull away. She just turned to me with an expression I'd never seen on her face before. Not fear, not surrender, acceptance. "It's already decided," she said quietly. "I can feel it." I told her we could leave, that it didn't matter what it wanted, that we didn't owe the lake anything. The words sounded thin even to me. That was when the voices returned, not from the trees, not from the shore, from the water itself. Clear, singular. Her voice, layered with something deeper beneath it. "Come closer," it said. "Just look." Stephanie stepped out of my grip. She walked down the porch steps barefoot, moving steadily, as if each step had been rehearsed. I followed, shouting her name, my voice breaking apart in the open air. She reached the edge of the lake. The water darkened around her feet as she stepped in. No ripples, no splash, just absorption. I ran, I caught her just as the water reached her knees. I wrapped my arms around her waist and pulled as hard as I could. She was heavier than she should have been, not with weight, but with resistance, like trying to pull someone through wet cement. "Ryan," she said calmly, not looking at me. "Please." Something moved beneath the surface, not rising, not thrashing, aligning. The water climbed her body without motion, without urgency. When it reached her chest, the pressure changed. My arms began to slip. My feet sank into the mud at the shoreline. I screamed for help, even though there was no one to hear me. The lake pulled once. That was all it took. Stephanie vanished without a sound. No struggle, no splash, just absence, like she had been removed from the world rather than taken. I fell forward into the water, reaching blindly, my hands closing on nothing but cold depth. The voices stopped. The lake went still. I stayed there until my body gave out, until my lungs burned and my arms shook too badly to keep searching. Eventually, instinct dragged me back to shore, coughing and broken. The cabin behind me was silent. By evening, the water reflected the sky again. If you hadn't been there, you would never know anything had happened. I'm 70 years old now. It feels strange to write that. For a long time stopped meaning much to me. Days passed, years stacked up. Birthdays came and went without ceremony. Everything after the lake felt like something extra, borrowed, conditional. I left that place the same day it took her. I didn't pack. I didn't lock the door. I drove until my hands stopped shaking and the trees thinned into something ordinary. I told the police what happened. I told them she drowned, that she walked into the water and I couldn't pull her out. They searched the lake for 3 days. Divers went down with ropes and lights. They dragged the bottom. They marked grids. They asked me the same questions again and again, gently at first, then with the tired patience reserved for stories that don't quite add up. They never found her. No body, no clothing, no trace. The official word was presumed drowned. I didn't argue. I knew better than to ask what happens to someone that Teiche Lake decides to keep. I moved away, changed cities, changed jobs. I learned how to sleep with noise around me. I married once. It didn't last. There are some things you don't bring into another person's life, no matter how much you care about them. Every year, on the same day, I go back. The road is more overgrown now. The cabin is gone, rotted, collapsed, reclaimed by the forest. But the lake is unchanged, still, dark, perfectly patient. I walk the shoreline slowly, eyes on the water, looking for anything that doesn't belong. A shape, a shadow, a hint of movement beneath the surface. I've never seen her, but sometimes, when the light is just right, when the wind dies completely, I feel it again. That gentle pull, that focused attention. I don't hear voices anymore, not words, not names. I think the lake learned something from me. It learned patience. I never step into the water. I never stay after sunset. Still, every year, I come back and look, because if the lake ever gives her up, even for a moment, I want to be there.